How's it going, everyone? Tougie here, back again, this time with something a little bit different. This is going to be my NHL 2015-2016 prediction video. Very quickly, I will go through how I think the playoff brackets will end up, who I think will inevitably win the Stanley Cup. Now, I'll start off by saying this is nearly impossible to do. It's just so ridiculous to try and predict what's going to happen, especially with so few teams you can really feel confident in saying aren't going to be very good. And in the Western Conference, it's virtually impossible. It's the Wild West in the Western Conference again. It's going to be insane to see what happens this year. Anyway, let's get to it. Eastern Conference Atlantic Division. My prediction simply, Tampa Bay wins the Atlantic Division as well as the President's Trophy. I think Tampa is just way too strong. I think they got knocked down. This is going to be very similar to a Pittsburgh-Detroit situation. Pittsburgh gets knocked on their ass. They come back next year and win it all. Will they play Chicago? That I'm not sure, but I have a strong feeling Tampa is going to have an amazing year. It does rely a bit on the health of Ben Bishop and Victor Hedman, but when you have that much offensive strength, it's nearly impossible to fail. Second place in the Atlantic, and this hurts me tremendously, but I have to go with Montreal. While their offense may be a little bit unpredictable, you have stuff going on with Zach Kassian. You have a lot of question marks in terms of that roster and their goal-scoring ability. But at the end of the day, you have Carey Price. Carey Price is the best goaltender in the world, the best goaltender of his generation. Obviously, I love Tuukka Rask. I respect the hell out of Henrik Lundqvist. Carey Price is the man in this league. Not to mention a certain someone named PK Subban. He's pretty good too. This next spot was nearly impossible to pick, but I'm going to go with Detroit. Now, Montreal, Tampa, Detroit was the order last year, so essentially it's the same order, just flip Montreal and Tampa. With Detroit, you have Jimmy Howard, you have Peter Mrazek in net. Either way, I think either one of those goalies can lead you to the playoffs. You have the big question marks with Datsyuk and Zetterberg. Can they stay healthy? Can guys like Franzen stay healthy? Nicholas Cronwall as well. But when you have emerging players like Riley Sheahan, Darren Helm, Advil Cater had a great season last year, in my opinion. Detroit is going to be a tough team to overcome. Say what you want about them losing Mike Babcock, but the bottom line is Detroit as an organization knows their system. They know how to win. This will certainly not be the year they finally miss. They are going to make the playoffs easily. Switching over to the Metro, and then we'll get to the wild card. Number one team, the winners of the Metropolitan Division, I am going with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not the easiest decision to make when Fleury is a question mark every year, but defensively, you have Crystal Tang if he can be healthy. You have Oli Mata, and I think the addition of Phil Kessel is going to be one of the biggest trades in NHL history. This is going to turn Pittsburgh back around. Whether or not they turn into a superpower, I'm not sure, but they will certainly have the ability. Crosby, Malkin, Kessel, doesn't matter who you play Kessel with. Either way, I think Kessel gets at least 40 goals this year, maybe pushes for 50, at least 40 assists. He is going to have an absolute monster year, as are the Penguins. Second place, and again, this is tough, and it's going to be a very similar story as with Montreal and the Atlantic. It is the New York Rangers. You have Henrik Lundqvist, probably the second best goalie in the league. And while I'm more confident with New York's ability offensively, with guys like Stepan, Brassard, Rick Nash is always at least bothers to show up in the regular season. You still have McDonough, you still have Girardi, you have Mark Stahl. This is a very well-built team. Do I think they'll be as good as they were last year? No. Has their window closed? I'm not going to say for sure, but they will make the playoffs again this year. Once again, third place was another tough decision, but I'm going to go with the Washington Capitals. Makes me nervous to say, as a fan of Alex Ovechkin, they need to get it done this year. Granted, Braden Holtby is going to be a dominant goalie for years to come now, but I feel like the core that they have in place, the guys they have in place, with Ovechkin, with Backstrom, Johansson, Kuznetsov, on defense, Niskanen, Orpik, you have the pieces, you have to put it together. I think Barry Trotz can do it. They just need to execute. They need to make this their year. Getting to the wild card in the Eastern Conference, and it's two tough choices, but I'm going to go with the New York Islanders and the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Islanders are another team that's pressing. I think because of Pittsburgh's resurgence, that's why I was hesitant to put them into one of the top 3 spots in the Metro. But despite the question mark known as Halak, you have John Tavares, you have Kyle Okposo, and you have some great young players on that team like Strome and Anders Lee. You have some great players, Johnny Boychuk. I don't like calling players underrated, especially when they were a former Bruin. Johnny Boychuk's one of the best defensemen in the league. I don't care what you have to say in regards to that. The Islanders are going to be a good team. Pittsburgh's resurgence is going to scare them a little bit, but they're still going to make the playoffs. And as far as Columbus goes, all they have to do is perform as well as they did last year, just avoid the injuries and put everything together. You still have Bobrovsky, you have a solid defensive core, a pretty young defensive core, but a solid one nonetheless. If Nick Foligno can replicate, 2/3 of what he did last year, same with Scott Hartnell, you still have Ryan Johansson. This is a solid team, particularly now with the addition of Brendan Saad. Yes, you lost a couple of pieces that you had to give up to Chicago, but this is still a very good team. They're going to make the playoffs. Which leads me into the teams that aren't. We'll start off with the Florida Panthers. I think they're just a couple pieces away. Luongo's going to have another great year. Aaron Ekblad's going to have to continue to get better. Kulikov and Goodbranson, still question marks for me personally. Solid players, but are they enough to get Florida there? Yes, you have Barkov, you have Bjugstad, Huberdeau, even Yager at this point. I just don't know it's enough. I hope it is. I would love to see Florida back in the playoffs. I just don't think it's going to be enough. Toronto, you already know it. Toronto is not going to be a good team. They are in full-on rebuild mode. It is what it is. They're not making it. Buffalo, they are a much better team this year with Evander Kane and Jack Eichel, but goaltending is still a big question mark. Can Robin Lehner lead this team? I don't think they're going to get close to the playoffs, but they are going to be a much more competitive team this season and in the future, undoubtedly. 3 teams from the Metro that I have not making the playoffs. Philadelphia, there's still just too many question marks on that team. Goaltending, Steve Mason does a fine job. Defensively, you just don't know what it's going to be like when you're sending down Andrew McDonald. You sign Evgeny Medvedev from the KHL. You give him 3 years when he's not really proven, at least over here. Philadelphia, I think their ownership and their managing is just too big of question. You don't know if something's going to happen with the Shen brothers. You don't know what is going to happen in the Vinny Lecavalier saga, which continues to be ongoing. You still have Wayne Simmons, Claude Giroux, and Jakub Voracek, but I just think there are too many other question marks to mark them down for a playoff spot. New Jersey, Corey Schneider, one of the better goalies in the league. Too many question marks on that team. The defense just is not looking good whatsoever, and even though Bryce Salvador can't be considered one of the better defensemen in the league, he's still a pretty big piece of that team. I just don't see New Jersey having enough. They are going to be members of the Austin Matthews sweepstakes, along with Carolina. Now, Carolina's got some good young pieces. Obviously, Noah Hannafin just drafted. You have Elias Lindholm, and you have Eddie Locke. But apparently with Cam Ward somehow still being the starter, I have no idea how. I get it. You're loyal to him, and you're paying him a lot of money. That needs to be Eddie Locke's net now, not even sooner rather than later. That needs to be his net now. Regardless, Carolina is not going to be a very good team. They are also going to be in the Austin Matthews sweepstakes. To the Western Conference, and this is just a pure crapshoot. We'll start in the Central Division. My pick for number 1 out of the Central is the St. Louis Blues. I can't help it. It's just with Tarasenko, Pietrangelo, just the names on this team. They are too good to fail. They've been too good to fail for 3 years, and they finally failed, and they continue to fail. They need to turn it on this season. This may be the last season really in their window. A lot of the core is still locked up, but they, again, much like Washington, they need to get it done. And as obvious as that is to say, it's really the only thing I can say about the St. Louis Blues. They are too big to fail, yet they continue to fail. They're too good to fail, yet they continue to fail. They need to piece it together. They will win the Central Division. I don't know if it'll be enough to win the Western Conference overall, though. Second place, the Chicago Blackhawks. Bottom line is Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Corey Crawford, Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Marian Hossa. They're all still there. I cannot bet against Chicago to miss the playoffs. Third place, it gets a little bit more difficult, and this is going to be perhaps somewhat surprising given the ridiculous amount of teams. There's not a single bad team in the Central Division. I'm giving it to Nashville simply for Pekka Rinne. Their defense, it's not underrated. People know how good their defense is, particularly obviously with Weber and Roman Josi. Offensive is a question, but I have a feeling they're going to get it done. And when you have a defense and a goaltending combo like you do, you're not going to need more often than 2 goals, maybe even 1 goal to win a game. I like what Nashville's doing, particularly with Peter Laviolette. I think they're going to have a good year. Pacific Division, and unsurprisingly, I have Anaheim at number 1. I'm not giving them the President's Trophy. I am saying they're going to win the Western Conference. I do think Tampa is just going to beat them out for the President's Trophy. I don't need to hype up Anaheim. You know exactly what they are. They're a cup favorite for a reason. Second place, I have the LA Kings. They're going to bounce back undeniably. Again, Jonathan Quick, Kopitar, Milan Lucic now, Dustin Brown, Jeff Carter, Gaborik. Like, I can just sit here and keep naming off people. Yes, they are without Voynov. Yes, they are without Mike Richards, but they still have a great team, and there is no way last season can't be considered a fluke. They are going to march back into the playoffs. Speaking of last season being flukes, I don't think last season was a fluke for the Calgary Flames. They are going to get the 3rd spot out of the Pacific Division. While goaltending is still a question, they have perhaps the best defensive core in the league with Giordano, with Brody, with Weidman, now with Dougie Hamilton, for Christ's sakes. Calgary has an amazing team, and up front as well, Monahan, Goodrow. This team is for real. They are here now, and they are going to be good for a very long time. Wild card spots, and this is where it got really difficult, just straight up. I'm going with Minnesota. It's not the easiest thing to do. I don't trust Devin Dubnyk. The defense is a little bit of a question mark, although I do like Minnesota's defense. The offense is also a bit of a question mark, but I feel like, again, they're just too good to miss out, although I won't be surprised if they miss out, much like Winnipeg, who I have in my second wildcard spot. Again, goaltending is the question, but they have the talent to make it. That's really all I can say about either of those teams, especially when I'm picking them over Dallas with Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin and now Patrick Sharp. The defense, again, is a question mark. The goaltending is a question mark. That's the story of the Western Conference. Colorado, who I have missing. You have McKinnon, you have Duchesne, you have Landeskog, Iginla. Defensively with Eric Johnson, goaltender. Again, it's a question mark with Varlamov. Can he bounce back to his form 2 seasons ago where he carried Colorado to the playoffs? I don't think he can, and that's why I did not choose them. In the Pacific Division, San Jose, there's just too many question marks. This team is falling apart. They have some good young talent, but truly I don't know what they're doing over there. I thank them for the 1st round pick for Martin Jones. I don't think he and Stalock will be able to carry them into the playoffs. Defensively, it's still a bit of a question. Yes, you have Brent Burns. He's not enough to carry it in. Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau continue to be disrespected by this franchise. I still am tempted to put them in a playoff spot because of Couture and Pavelski, but I just don't think this team has enough. They're not going to make it. Neither is Edmonton or Arizona. Again, young, rebuilding teams. Edmonton's going to be much more exciting to watch this year, but Cam Talbot, I don't think is going to be able to carry them on his back. Defensively, there's a lot of question marks, and I don't think some people are really looking at that defense. That is not a good front 6, no matter who you put in that lineup. Yes, offensively, you have Eberle, Hall, McDavid, Nugent-Hopkins, Yakupov, but it's not going to be enough this season. Arizona, it's kind of a similar story. Mike Smith, don't trust him whatsoever. Defensively, you got some good pieces, some good prospects. Offensively, you have Max Domi in the lineup now, among others, but it's certainly not going to be enough. Arizona, more than Edmonton, are going to be competing in the Austin Matthews sweepstakes. Last but not least, the only team we have yet to mention would be the Vancouver Canucks. And simply put, I have no reason to not include them. I just don't think they're going to be able to essentially outduel Calgary for a spot. absolutely nothing wrong with Vancouver. Nothing would surprise me if they made it to the playoffs. I just can't see them beating out their competition. This video has already lasted way longer than it should have. We are just going to get right down to this and finish this up. First round between Tampa Bay and Columbus. We are giving it to Tampa. They are easily the better team, as I said. My prediction for President's Trophy winners, Montreal and Detroit. I am going to give that to Montreal. Again, on the back of Carey Price. I cannot go against him when it comes to a matchup against Detroit. Not to say Detroit isn't stacked enough offensively. They are. I just think Montreal would have enough to outlast them. Pittsburgh and the New York Islanders, and this is actually where I would give my first upset, despite how offensively stacked the Pittsburgh Penguins are. For some reason, I see the New York Islanders coming out on top in this series. I think the Islanders learned a lot as a team, as a particularly young team, in terms of playoff experience, which they gained in the playoffs last year. And I think it would pay off here. They would get at least this first round win against Pittsburgh. And the final matchup of the Eastern Conference, the New York Rangers and the Washington Capitals, and I would give this to the Capitals. Again, I think they are primed this year for a good run. Not to say New York isn't as well. I could easily see the Rangers going all the way to the finals, or at least back to the Eastern Conference finals. But in this particular occasion, I'm going to give it to Washington. Over to the Western Conference, and there should be no doubt about the first round matchup. Anaheim once again dispatches of Winnipeg in the first round. Perhaps it wouldn't be a sweep this time out, but regardless, the outcome remains the same, and it's another year of disappointment in the Great White North. LA and Calgary, and unfortunately for Calgary, I don't believe there would be another first round upset. I'm going to give this to LA. Again, I think they are primed and ready. They are going to be perhaps more determined than ever. Minnesota and St. Louis, and unfortunately for many, it's redemption time for the Blues as they advance. And to end the first round, we have Chicago over Nashville. Once again, I simply cannot imagine Chicago getting booted out in the first round. Eastern Conference semifinals, and Tampa Bay advances over the Montreal Canadiens. And securing the right to face Tampa Bay in the Eastern Conference Finals is Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals. Western Conference semifinals between Anaheim and LA, and this series could truly go either way. I don't care how clear-cut of a favorite Anaheim is. LA in the playoffs are a dangerous, dangerous team, but I'm going to give this round to Anaheim. Now, I said I couldn't bet against Chicago in the playoffs, but I am going to here. I think this is finally the year St. Louis avenges themselves. Finally gets that monkey off their back. St. Louis advances over the Chicago Blackhawks. Eastern Conference semifinals, and as much as this hurts because I would absolutely love to see Alex Ovechkin in the Stanley Cup Finals, I'm giving this one to the Tampa Bay Lightning. They are just too strong. They're too well-rounded, too offensively stacked. They're going to the second consecutive Stanley Cup Final. And joining Tampa in the finals, it was a tough choice, but I am going to go with the early pre-season favorite. It's the Anaheim Ducks. So there you have it, the Stanley Cup Final, in my opinion, as a very early guess, will be between the Tampa Bay Lightning, the President's Trophy winning Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Anaheim Ducks. Now, this is an incredibly difficult matchup. You have some of the experienced, to describe Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry is not an easy thing, especially those two in a playoff scenario. And also despite Anaheim having the likes of a Cam Fowler, a Hampus Lindholm, a Sammy Vatanen, and a Kevin Bieksa, they have an amazing team. But if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but if I were, my money is on the Tampa Bay Lightning to be your 2015-16 Stanley Cup champions. I just think they are too well-rounded of a team, too offensively stacked, and if Ben Bishop can stay healthy, I truly don't think there's any beating this team. Especially after last year's disappointment, they now know what it's like to be there and to be disappointed, and I just don't think that'll happen again. This team is something special. Youth coming together, an excellent example of signing and drafting from the Tampa Bay organization. And this team is going to win now, or it has to be dismantled to fit under the current cap environment. This is a special team, and they're going to cap it off by once again disappointing the fans in Anaheim, whose window might very well be closing. As is Tampa. Again, they are going to have to dismantle this team. They're not going to be able to keep all of these pieces, but for now it's going to work out in the most ideal fashion. Tampa Bay will be your 2016 Stanley Cup champions. So that is it for this extremely long video. That was certainly not intended to go this long, but hey, I get long-winded. I gave you my reasoning for each and every team either making it or not. With the exception of the Boston Bruins, there will be a season preview video up tomorrow, and then after that we will get back to hopefully daily uploads between NHL and FIFA, particularly with career mode. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you guys think is going to happen this season? Who is your early pick for Stanley Cup champion? What do you think of this bracket as well? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, leave a like if you have enjoyed, subscribe if you feel so inclined. It is very much appreciated, and I will catch you all next time.